She was 8 months pregnant, contractions 3 minutes apart, ice storm raging outside, and her husband, a CEO worth $300 million, told her to take some Tylenol. What happened next in that frozen parking lot would destroy his empire, expose his darkest secrets, and transform a desperate woman into the most powerful force he had ever faced. But here's what makes this story different from every betrayal you've ever heard. The other woman? She became the wife's greatest ally. The stranger who saved her life? He became something more. And the husband who thought he was untouchable? He lost everything. His company, his freedom, his legacy. Every single word of what you're about to hear will make your blood boil, then break your heart, then fill you with hope. Stay with me until the end, because the final twist, you'll never see it coming. This is the story of Caroline Mitchell, and it starts with one word, push. The baby's coming. Derek, we need to go now. Caroline Mitchell stood in the doorway of her husband's home office, one hand pressed against the wall for support, the other cradling her swollen belly. Outside, freezing rain hammered against the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. The weather service had been screaming warnings all day. Stay inside. Roads impassable. State of emergency declared. Her water had broken 20 minutes ago. The contractions were coming every 7 minutes now, each one a wave of pressure that stole her breath and buckled her knees. Derek didn't look up from his laptop. His phone was pressed between his ear and shoulder, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The Singapore deal. It was always the Singapore deal. Derek, she said again, louder this time. He held up one finger. The universal gesture for wait. The gesture she had seen 1,000 times in their 8 years of marriage. Wait while I finish this call. Wait while I close this deal. Wait while I build an empire that matters more than you ever will. Another contraction gripped her belly like a vice. She grabbed the door frame and breathed through it, counting the seconds until it passed. 37 seconds. They were getting longer. Derek finally covered the phone with his hand. Caroline, I'm in the middle of something. Call an ambulance. I tried. She could hear the panic creeping into her own voice. They said 2 hours minimum. Every emergency vehicle in the county is responding to accidents. Then wait. I can't wait. The baby is coming. Now, he sighed. That particular sigh she knew so well. The one that meant she was being inconvenient. The one that meant her needs were interfering with something more important. The one that made her feel small and foolish and desperately alone. The roads are sheets of ice, he said. I'm not risking my car for... He stopped himself. For what? She wanted to scream the words. For your wife? For your child? For the family you claim to love when the cameras are rolling? Take some Tylenol. Lie down. First babies take forever. My mother was in labor for 26 hours with me. He turned back to his phone, switching seamlessly into Japanese. Fluent, charming, engaged. The voice he used for people who actually mattered to him. Caroline stood frozen in the doorway. Her hand gripped the doorframe so tight her knuckles went white. She counted to 10 the way her therapist had taught her. 1, 2, 3. The way she had counted through every disappointment in this marriage. 4, 5, 6. The way she had made herself small to fit into the life Derek designed. 7, 8, 9. The way she had waited and hoped and believed that someday he would see her. Really see her. 10. He never looked up. Not once. She turned and walked away from his office door. Her bare feet were silent on the marble floors of their 12,000 square foot mansion. Past the nursery she had decorated alone because Derek was too busy to help choose paint colors. Past the wedding photos where his smile looked so genuine, back when she still believed it was. Past the gourmet kitchen where she had eaten countless dinners by herself while he worked late or traveled or simply forgot to come home. The hospital bag sat by the front door. She had packed it 3 weeks ago, folding tiny onesies and soft blankets with trembling hands. Derek had called her obsessive, paranoid. Typical Caroline, always worrying about nothing. Her car keys hung on the hook by the garage door. Her hands shook as she grabbed them. She was going to drive herself to the hospital. 8 months pregnant, in an ice storm, because her husband couldn't be bothered to pause a business call. The garage was cold. Her breath fogged the air as she waddled toward her silver Lexus SUV. Beside it sat Derek's black Porsche, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His precious Porsche that he polished every weekend. His precious Porsche that he wouldn't risk on icy roads. Not even to save his wife. Not even to meet his daughter. Another contraction hit, 6 minutes apart now. She gripped the car door and breathed through it, tears streaming down her face. Not from pain, from something deeper. Something that had been building for years. She climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The roads were exactly as bad as Derek had said. Worse. The freezing rain had coated everything in a layer of ice that glittered under the streetlights like crushed diamonds. Beautiful and deadly. Caroline's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her fingers went numb. She drove 15 miles per hour, her headlights barely cutting through the darkness. Trees were down everywhere. Power lines sagged with ice. The few other cars on the road crawled along like wounded animals. Memorial Hospital was 12 miles away. On a normal night, that meant 20 minutes. Tonight, it might as well be on the moon. A contraction hit. She pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and breathed through it. Counted the seconds. 5 minutes apart now. Her phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Don't forget to text me when you get there. She wanted to throw the phone out the window. She wanted to scream. She wanted to go back to that office and shake him until he understood what he was doing, what he was throwing away. Instead, she put the car back in drive and kept going. 1 mile at a time, windshield wipers fighting the freezing rain, heater blasting, baby kicking. Hold on, sweetheart, she whispered to her belly. Mommy's going to get us there. I promise. At mile 8, she saw the lights of the shopping plaza, the Whole Foods where she bought organic groceries, the Starbucks where she met Megan for coffee every Tuesday, the vast parking lot that had been her landmark for years, the halfway point between home and everywhere else. That was when the car hit black ice. The Lexus spun. Carolyn screamed. The world became a blur of streetlights and ice and pure animal terror. She yanked the steering wheel, trying to regain control, but the tires had nothing to grip. The car slid sideways, then backward, then forward again. When it finally stopped, she was facing the wrong direction. The engine sputtered once and the dashboard lights blinked frantically, then went dark. The worst contraction yet ripped through her body. She doubled over, gasping for air, her hands clutching her belly. Her phone had slid under the seat during the spin. She reached for it, but another contraction hit, and she couldn't bend that far. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The parking lot was empty. The freezing rain drummed against the windshield. The temperature inside the car was already dropping. And her baby was coming. Right now. Right here. In a Whole Foods parking lot. In an ice storm. Alone. Caroline tried to restart the car. Her fingers fumbled with the key, turning it once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The battery light blinked weakly, then died completely. No, 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 no. She reached for her phone again, stretching as far as her swollen belly would allow. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the case, but another contraction hit, and she had to stop. Had to grip the steering wheel and ride the wave of pain. 3 minutes apart now. The freezing rain was turning to ice on the windshield. Frost crept across the glass like fingers. Her breath fogged the air, each exhale a reminder of how cold it was getting. How cold her baby would be if she didn't get help. I'm not going to die here. She said the words out loud. They surprised her with their strength, their certainty. My baby is not going to die here. She leaned on the horn. The sound cut through the night, sharp and desperate. She pressed it again. 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 But the parking lot remained empty. The sound was swallowed by the storm, carried away on winds that howled like wolves. She was alone. Completely alone. For the first time since her water broke, Caroline allowed herself to fully understand what was happening. Her husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish her, had refused to drive her to the hospital. He had chosen a business call over her life, over their baby's life. He had told her to take some Tylenol, and now she was going to give birth in a frozen parking lot because there was no one else, because she had given up her kebab, her friends, her independence, all to support his career, because she had made herself so small that when she needed help, there was no one left to call. Headlights cut through the darkness. Carolyn's heart leaped. She leaned on the horn again, holding it down, praying that whoever was driving would stop. The vehicle was a truck, old, practical, a Ford F-150 that had seen better days but clearly didn't care about ice storms. It pulled into the parking lot slowly, carefully, and stopped about 20 feet from her car. A man got out, tall, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples. He was wearing an EMT jacket over a flannel shirt, and he moved with the calm confidence of someone who had seen emergencies before. He approached her car and tapped on the window. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Carolyn had never been so grateful to see a stranger in her entire life. She fumbled with the door handle, managing to crack it open a few inches. "I'm having a baby," she gasped. Right now, the man's expression shifted, not to panic, to focus. Professional assessment. He had done this before. "I'm Nathan," he said. "Nathan Reeves. I'm a paramedic. Off duty tonight, but I've got my kit in the truck. Can you unlock the door?" She did. The cold rushed in immediately, but so did help. Nathan opened the door wider and crouched beside her. His hands were gentle as he assessed the situation, checking her pulse, looking at her belly, noting the frequency of her contractions. "Baby's crowning," he said. His voice was calm, steady, almost soothing. "We're not making it to a hospital. Not in this weather. Not with how fast this little one wants to meet the world." "I can't do this," Carolyn whispered. "I can't have a baby in a parking lot." "You're not going to have a choice," he said gently. "But here's the good news. You are not alone anymore. I've delivered 11 babies in the field, never lost one. Not planning to start tonight." He met her eyes. "I'm going to need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded. What other option did she have? The next 11 minutes were a blur of pain and cold, and Nathan's steady voice. "Push. That's it. You're doing great. I can't do this." "You're already doing it. One more push. Come on, Caroline, one more." Ice formed on the windows. Her own screams echoed off the car's interior. Nathan's hands, steady and sure, guided her through each contraction. He had grabbed blankets from his truck, creating a makeshift nest of warmth. He talked her through every moment, never letting her give up, never letting her believe she couldn't do this. And then, a cry. Small, furious, the most beautiful sound Caroline had ever heard. "It's a girl," Nathan said. His voice was thick with emotion that seemed too personal for a stranger. "You have a beautiful baby girl." He worked quickly, clamping and cutting the cord with supplies from his EMT kit. Then he wrapped the baby in his own jacket and placed her on Caroline's chest. Caroline looked down at her daughter's face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A tuft of dark hair plastered to her head. Eyes squeezed shut against the harsh lights of the parking lot, but already so alive, so present, so real. "Grace," Caroline whispered. The name she had picked months ago, the name Derek had said was too plain, too simple. Not sophisticated enough for a Mitchell. Grace, because that was what this moment was. Grace she didn't deserve. Grace she had almost lost. Grace that had arrived anyway in the most impossible circumstances, delivered by a stranger in a frozen parking lot. Nathan retrieved her phone from under the seat and called 911. His voice was professional as he gave the dispatcher their location, their status, what they needed. Caroline barely heard the words. She was lost in her daughter's face, in the weight of this tiny body against her chest, in the miracle of survival. Her phone buzzed, a text notification. She didn't want to look, but she did. It was from Derek. Singapore deal closed, $47 million, celebrating with the team. He was celebrating, popping champagne and shaking hands and taking credit for millions of dollars, while she nearly died in a parking lot, while their daughter came into the world wrapped in a stranger's jacket because her father couldn't be bothered to drive 10 miles. The recognition hit her like a second labor, sharp and undeniable. This was who Derek was. This was who he had always been. The charming facade, the grand gestures, the promises of forever. They were all lies. They had always been lies. She had just refused to see it. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. The paramedics were kind, efficient, impressed by Nathan's work. You saved their lives, one of them told him as they loaded Caroline and Grace into the warm interior of the ambulance. In these conditions, without proper equipment, that's incredible. Nathan just shrugged. Right place, right time. But as they were about to close the ambulance doors, he stepped forward and pressed a business card into Caroline's hand. If you ever need anything, he said quietly, a witness, a friend, someone who saw what really happened tonight. His eyes met hers and she saw something there, something deeper than professional concern. He knows exactly what kind of man doesn't drive his pregnant wife to the hospital. Call me. She tucked the card into her hospital gown. The ambulance doors closed. The sirens started. And as they pulled out of the parking lot, Caroline looked back through the rear window. Nathan stood alone in the ice storm, watching them go. A stranger who had become her lifeline. A reminder that kindness still existed in a world that had felt so cold for so long. She held Grace closer and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever Derek said or did or threatened, she would never forget this moment. She would never forget what it felt like to be abandoned. And she would never, ever let her daughter feel that way. Memorial Hospital at 3 a.m. was a symphony of beeping monitors and hushed voices. Fluorescent lights cast everything in a harsh, clinical glow. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and sterile. Carolyn lay in her hospital bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. Grace slept in the bassinet beside her, swaddled in a soft pink blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Both healthy, both alive. A miracle, the doctors kept saying, an absolute miracle. The door to her room opened. Derek walked in. He was still wearing his expensive suit, the charcoal gray one he saved for important meetings. His hair was perfect. Not a single wrinkle marred his appearance despite the hour. He looked like he had just stepped out of a magazine, not like a man who had spent the night worried about his wife and newborn daughter. I came as soon as I could, he said. Caroline stared at him. As soon as you could? The meeting ran long, and then there was traffic and... As soon as you could, she cut him off. Her voice was quiet, dangerous. The voice of a woman who had finally stopped making excuses. I texted you 5 hours ago that I was in labor. You didn't respond. I was in the meeting. You know how important this deal was. I gave birth in a parking lot, Derek. The words hung in the air between them. Derek's expression flickered. Something that might have been shame if he were capable of feeling it. I gave birth in a Whole Foods parking lot, Caroline continued, in an ice storm, because you wouldn't drive me to the hospital. A stranger delivered our daughter. A stranger wrapped her in his own jacket to keep her warm. A stranger called 911 while I was bleeding in my car. And you? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You were celebrating. Caroline, be reasonable. The roads were dangerous. You said yourself that ambulances weren't available. What was I supposed to do? Drive me? She said the words slowly, clearly, as if explaining to a child. You were supposed to drive me. That's what husbands do. That's what fathers do. Derek's jaw tightened. She could see him calculating, not how to apologize, not how to make this right, how to manage the situation, how to control the narrative. We should keep this quiet, he said. For the company. Can you imagine the headlines if this gets out? CEO's wife gives birth in parking lot. It would be a PR nightmare. Caroline stared at her husband, really looked at him for the first time in years. The jaw she once found strong now looked rigid, cold. The eyes she thought were focused now looked calculating, empty. When had she stopped seeing him clearly? When had she started making excuses? The signs were all there. Every missed appointment, every canceled dinner. Every time he chose work over her, she just hadn't wanted to see. Get out, she said. Excuse me? Get out of my room now. Caroline, you're being hysterical. The birth was traumatic. You're not thinking clearly. I have never thought more clearly in my life. Get out. Derek's expression hardened. This isn't over. No, Caroline agreed. It's not. He left. Of course he left. He had never stayed when things got difficult. He had never been the kind of man who fought for anything except his own success. Caroline's phone lit up with notifications. Social media. Someone had posted something. She opened Instagram. Nathan, the paramedic. He had posted a simple message with no photo. Tonight, I helped deliver a baby in a parking lot during an ice storm. The mother drove herself because no one else would take her. She's one of the strongest people I've ever met. The post was vague enough not to identify her specifically, but it was specific enough that people were asking questions. Who was this woman? Where was her partner? Why had she been alone? The local news picked up the story within hours. Mystery hero delivers baby in ice storm. The headline ran on 3 different stations. Then someone recognized her car in the parking lot footage from Whole Foods security cameras. A silver Lexus SUV with distinctive vanity plates that spelled Mitchell. By morning, the story had evolved. CEO's wife drives herself to hospital in ice storm, gives birth alone in parking lot. The comments section exploded. What kind of husband lets his pregnant wife drive alone in dangerous conditions? What kind of man chooses work over his family? Derek's phone was ringing off the hook. His PR team was scrambling. His face was plastered across social media with captions that ranged from critical to cruel. And for the first time in years, Carolyn didn't care about protecting his image. Megan arrived at noon. Megan Holloway, best friend since college, divorce attorney with a reputation for winning impossible cases. She took one look at Caroline and Grace and burst into tears. "I should have been there," Megan said, wrapping her arms around Caroline carefully, mindful of the IV still attached to her arm. "I should have driven you myself. I didn't call anyone." Caroline's voice was hollow. "I thought Derek would—" She stopped herself, couldn't finish the sentence. "Stop," Megan's voice was fierce. "Stop making excuses for him. You have been making excuses for that man for 8 years. It ends now." The memories flooded in like water through a broken dam. Their first date. Derek had been charming, attentive, hanging on her every word. He sent flowers to her office every day for a month. Red roses on Monday, white lilies on Tuesday, pink peonies on Wednesday. Her coworkers had been jealous. Her mother had been thrilled. Caroline had felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The proposal, a private beach in Maui, sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Derek on one knee with a ring that cost more than her annual salary. "You're the only thing I've ever wanted that money couldn't buy," he had said. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." The wedding. 400 guests. A dress that cost $30,000. His mother Patricia complaining about the shade of white, about the flower arrangements, about Caroline's family being too working class for the Mitchell name. But none of it had mattered because Derek loved her, because they were starting a life together, because she believed. All those memories, tainted now, every sweet moment overshadowed by what came after. The slowly closing doors on her friendships because Derek didn't like her spending time with people he didn't approve of. The gradual isolation from her family because they weren't sophisticated enough. The systematic dismantling of her career because he wanted her home, wanted her available, wanted her dependent on him. She had given up everything. Her job, her friends, her sense of self. And for what? For a man who couldn't drive 10 miles to save her life. Megan pulled out her phone. "Caroline, there's something you need to see. I didn't want to tell you before, but now—" She showed her a photograph. Derek at a restaurant 3 weeks ago, his hand on another woman's back, his lips at her ear. The woman was young and beautiful, with auburn hair and expensive clothes. And she was wearing a ring, an engagement ring, one that looked suspiciously familiar. "My ring," Carolyn whispered, "the one I lost at the gym." Megan nodded. "Her name is Victoria Ashford. She's been his executive assistant for 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years of late nights at the office. 2 years of business trips where he was always too busy to call." Carolyn looked at the photo, looked at Derek's hand on Victoria's back, looked at her own engagement ring on another woman's finger. And something inside her finally broke. Caroline stared at the photograph until her eyes blurred with tears. 2 years. Victoria had been Derek's assistant for 2 years. The engagement ring, the one Derek said must have slipped off at the gym, the one he never helped her look for, the one that cost $50,000, was on another woman's hand. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you known?" Megan hesitated. "I had suspicions for a while, but I didn't have proof until last month. I hired a private investigator." "Carolyn, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but you were so far along in the pregnancy, and I didn't want to—" "It's not your fault. There's more." Megan's voice was gentle but firm. I did some digging. As your lawyer. Caroline, he's been moving assets. What do you mean? Shell companies? Offshore accounts? He's been slowly transferring money for the past 18 months. If you divorced him right now, on paper, he'd be worth maybe $2 million. Mitchell Pharmaceuticals is valued at $300 million. Exactly. The room felt like it was spinning. Carolyn reached for the bassinet, needing to ground herself in something real, something pure. She picked up Grace, who had started to fuss, and held her close. The baby was warm against her chest, soft, innocent, unaware of the storm that was raging around her, unaware that her father had been planning to abandon them both. Carolyn walked to the window. Outside, the ice storm had finally passed. The sun was coming out, glittering on the frozen trees like diamonds, like the diamond earrings Derek had given her to apologize for missing her birthday, like the diamond bracelet he had bought when he forgot their anniversary, like all the expensive gifts he used to distract her from the things that actually mattered. She fed Grace, the simple, ancient act of nourishing her child, the warmth of that tiny body against her chest. The world shrank to this moment, this baby, this truth. Whatever Derek had done, whatever he was planning, this perfect little creature existed, and Carolyn would protect her with everything she had. The door to her hospital room opened again. Patricia Mitchell swept in like a cold front. Designer coat, perfect silver hair, pearls at her throat, eyes like chips of ice. Carolyn. Not a greeting, an accusation. What have you done? Excuse me? This media circus? Your little parking lot stunt? Do you have any idea what this is doing to Derek? To the company? Mitchell Pharmaceuticals stock dropped 8% this morning. My stunt? Carolyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. I almost died, Patricia. Your granddaughter was born in a parking lot because your son wouldn't drive me to the hospital. If you had planned better, I was 8 months pregnant in an ice storm. What exactly should I have planned? Patricia's perfectly painted lips thinned into a hard line. This family has given you everything. A home, status, a lifestyle most women would kill for, and this is how you repay us? Carolyn looked at her mother-in-law, really looked, the tight grip on the designer purse, the slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hand, the way her eyes darted to Grace and then away, like the baby was an accusation rather than a blessing. Patricia knew. She knew what her son was. She had always known. She just decided long ago that power and money mattered more than truth. That image was more important than integrity. How young had she been when she made that choice? How trapped did she feel now, defending the indefensible, because admitting the truth would mean her whole life was a lie? I think you should leave, Carolyn said. You're making a mistake. Derek won't tolerate this kind of public humiliation. He will destroy you. He already tried. Carolyn's voice was steady, her daughter in her arms rose, her fear finally gone. He left me to die in a parking lot. There's nothing worse he can do. Patricia's mouth opened, closed. For once, she had nothing to say. Leave now. She left. The door swung shut behind her, and the room was quiet again. Just Caroline and Grace and Megan, who had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence. That woman is a piece of work, Megan finally said. She's terrified. Caroline shook her head slowly. She spent her whole life protecting Derek, enabling him. If people find out who he really is, everything she's built crumbles too. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I thought you should see this before it goes public. I'm so sorry. A video was attached. Security footage, grainy but clear enough. The front porch of her own house. The Ring doorbell camera that Derek had installed for security. The timestamp read 11:32 on the night of the ice storm. 15 minutes before Caroline had told Derek she was in labor. In the video, Derek stood in the driveway. Victoria Ashford stood beside him, wrapped in a fur coat that Caroline had never seen before. Derek was kissing her, deep, lingering, passionate, the kind of kiss he hadn't given Caroline in years. Then he spoke. The doorbell camera picked up every word. Go home and get some sleep. I'll make an excuse to meet you later. Caroline won't even notice I'm gone. She never does anymore. Victoria smiled. And the baby? Derek shrugged. First babies take forever. I'll be there for the actual birth. That's what matters for appearances. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Singapore's calling. I have to take this. I'll see you tomorrow. He kissed her one more time. Then Victoria walked away and Derek went back inside. 15 minutes later, Caroline had come to his office door, in labor, begging for help, and he had told her to take some Tylenol. Caroline's hands shook as she watched the video, but not with grief, not with sadness, with something harder, something cleaner. Clarity. She opened Megan's contact and typed 3 words. Let's destroy him. Megan's law office occupied the top floor of a glass and steel tower downtown. Everything was sharp lines and clean surfaces. A war room for women who had been underestimated. Caroline sat across from her best friend, Grace, sleeping in a carrier beside her, 3 days out of the hospital, 3 days since the video surfaced, 3 days since Derek's PR team went into overdrive trying to spin the narrative. Here's what we know, Megan said, spreading documents across the conference table. Derek has been systematically hiding assets for 18 months. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, real estate in Dubai, a yacht registered to a holding company in Panama. On paper, he's worth $2 million. In reality, we're looking at closer to $300 million. He's been having an affair for at least 2 years, Caroline added, with documentation. Victoria Ashford, his executive assistant. We have photos, we have video, we have credit card statements for hotel rooms and jewelry and trips to the Bahamas. Megan paused. And we have the Ring doorbell footage from the night you went into labor. Can we use that? It's your house, your security system. Absolutely, we can use it. What about criminal charges? Megan leaned forward. That's where it gets interesting. Refusing to transport a woman in active labor when you have the means to do so, especially when emergency services were unavailable, could constitute reckless endangerment. It's a stretch, but with the right prosecutor, it's possible. And the company, Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, isn't just Derek's company. It was his father's before him. When Richard Mitchell died 5 years ago, the shares transferred to Derek. But there was a clause in Richard's will, a morality clause. Meaning, if Derek is found guilty of moral turpitude or criminal conduct that damages the company's reputation, the board of directors has the authority to remove him as CEO and redistribute his shares. Megan smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Your mother-in-law wasn't wrong. Mitchell Pharmaceutical stock has dropped significantly since your story went viral. Investors are asking questions. The board is nervous. Caroline absorbed this information. Her whole life, she had let Derek handle the business side of things. He had patted her hand and told her not to worry about money. That was his job. She had trusted him. Trust. That was the real betrayal, not the affair, not the hidden assets. The way he had made her trust him while systematically preparing to destroy her. He thought I was too stupid to fight back, she said quietly. He thought I was the trophy wife who would just take whatever settlement he offered and disappear. Was he wrong? Caroline looked at her daughter, at Grace sleeping peacefully, unaware of the war being waged on her behalf. Yes, she met Megan's eyes. He was wrong. The allies came quickly. Nathan Reeves agreed to testify. The off-duty paramedic who had delivered Grace in a frozen parking lot while the baby's father celebrated a business deal and kissed his mistress goodbye. His account was detailed, professional, damning. She was in active labor when I found her, Nathan told the investigators. Contractions 3 minutes apart. The baby was crowning. There's no way her husband didn't know how serious the situation was. She told me she had begged him to drive her to the hospital. He refused. Dr. Susan Blackwell, Caroline's obstetrician, reviewed the medical records. Based on the progression of labor when she arrived at the hospital, she had been experiencing contractions for at least 4 to 5 hours before delivery, which means they started while she was still at home. And her husband knew? If she told him, which she says she did, then yes. Given the severity of the ice storm and the unavailability of emergency services, the only reasonable response would have been to drive her to the hospital immediately, or at minimum, to stay with her and provide support. More witnesses emerged. The housekeeper who had overheard Derek tell Caroline to take some Tylenol. The driver who confirmed Derek's Porsche never left the garage that night. The security company that logged Derek's phone location, placing him at his office holiday party with Victoria for 2 hours before going home, not on a video call with Singapore as he had claimed. Caroline met with a forensic accountant. For 3 hours, they traced Derek's financial maze. Shell companies within shell companies, real estate purchased through intermediaries, a network of offshore accounts designed to make his true wealth invisible. By the end, she knew more about her husband's finances than she had learned in 8 years of marriage. All those times she had asked about their accounts, all those times he had dismissed her concerns, all those times he had made her feel foolish for even wondering it. She thought about her younger self, the ambitious marketing executive who had given up her career because Derek wanted a wife who was available, who was present, who didn't have distractions. She had been the distraction, a pretty face for photo opportunities, a warm body for the times when he wasn't with Victoria, a signature on documents she was never allowed to read. Never again. Robert Caldwell called on a Wednesday afternoon. Mrs. Mitchell. I'd like to meet. Robert Caldwell was the chairman of the Mitchell Pharmaceuticals Board of Directors, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and expensive suits, a man who had built and destroyed companies, who had survived corporate battles that left others ruined. They met in a private room at the Four Seasons, white tablecloths and crystal glasses, the quiet murmur of old money conducting business. The board is concerned, Robert said. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. The parking lot incident has gone viral. Our stock has dropped 11%. Institutional investors are asking questions. Questions about what? About the kind of man who won't drive his pregnant wife to the hospital. About the kind of leader who prioritizes a business call over his child's birth. Robert paused. About whether that man should be running a pharmaceutical company, a company whose entire brand is built on caring about people's health and well-being. What are you proposing? Robert slid a folder across the table. The board is prepared to remove Derek as CEO, but we need grounds, legal grounds. If you can provide evidence of financial impropriety or conduct that violates his employment contract. He met her eyes. We'll give you everything, his shares, his seat on the board, his legacy. Caroline looked at the folder. Inside were documents she didn't fully understand. Stock transfers, voting rights, board resolutions. Why would you do this, she asked. Derek has run this company for 5 years. He's tripled the stock price. Derek has also made enemies, Robert said simply. He's arrogant, reckless. He treats the board like servants rather than partners. And now, Robert shook his head. Now he's become a liability. The kind of liability that costs billions of dollars in market value. This is about money. This is about survival, Mrs. Mitchell. Mitchell Pharmaceuticals employs 12,000 people. We have drugs in development that could save millions of lives. We cannot let one man's personal failures destroy everything his father built. Caroline thought about Richard Mitchell, Derek's father, a man she had only met twice before he died. He had been kind to her, welcoming, nothing like his son. What do you need from me? Evidence. Proof of financial misconduct. Proof that Derek has violated the terms of his employment. Robert leaned forward. I understand you've been working with forensic accountants. I understand you've uncovered some concerning transactions. I have. Then we have a common interest. Robert stood. Think about it, Mrs. Mitchell. And remember, Derek doesn't just deserve to lose. He deserves to lose everything. Just like you almost did. Derek called 17 times in one day. Caroline didn't answer. His texts grew increasingly desperate. We need to talk. Caroline, be reasonable. You're destroying our family. I'll fight for custody. You'll never see Grace again. I'm sorry, please. Just answer. She read each message. Then she blocked his number. The media circus intensified. Parking lot baby trended on social media for 3 days straight. Women across the country began sharing their own stories using the hashtag he wouldn't drive. My husband told me I was being dramatic when my contractions started. I delivered in our bathroom while he watched football. My ex refused to leave work for the birth of our twins. His secretary drove me to the hospital. My mother-in-law told me to stop making a fuss. It was just labor. Women had been doing it for thousands of years. Thousands of stories. Thousands of women who had been dismissed, ignored, abandoned in their most vulnerable moments. The collective pain was staggering. Derek tried damage control. He posted a heartfelt Instagram message about how much he loved his wife and daughter. He donated $50,000 to women's health charities. His PR team released a carefully worded statement about private family matters and the stress of building a successful company. It was too late. The internet had already decided. Derek Mitchell was the villain in a story that resonated with every woman who had ever been told her pain didn't matter. Caroline moved back into her childhood bedroom at her mother's house, a small room with faded wallpaper and carpet that needed replacing. Grace slept in a bassinet that had once been Caroline's, passed down through generations of women who had survived harder things than cheating husbands. The room was tiny compared to the mansion. No marble floors, no gourmet kitchen, no closets full of designer clothes she had never really wanted. It felt like home. She sat on the floor one evening, Grace sleeping peacefully, and pulled out her high school yearbook. Found her senior photo, a bright-eyed girl with big dreams and bigger ambitions. Caroline Hayes, most likely to succeed. She had been going to change the world, had plans, dreams, a full scholarship to Northwestern, a job offer from a top marketing firm before graduation, recognition, respect, the promise of a life built on her own merits. She had given it all up for Derek. He had said he wanted a partner. What he had wanted was an accessory, a beautiful, compliant accessory who would smile for cameras and host dinner parties and never ever ask questions about where the money went. She had been that accessory. For 8 years, she had played the role perfectly. Never again. The last person Caroline expected to see at her mother's door was Victoria Ashford. The other woman stood on the porch in the rain. No umbrella, mascara running down her cheeks, the engagement ring conspicuously absent from her finger. "I know you hate me," Victoria said. "You should hate me, but there's something you need to know." Every instinct screamed at Caroline to slam the door. This woman had slept with her husband for 2 years. This woman had worn her engagement ring. This woman had been there, in the driveway, kissing Derek, while Caroline labored inside. But something in Victoria's eyes stopped her. Fear, real fear, the kind of fear Caroline recognized because she had felt it herself. She let her in. They sat across from each other in her mother's small kitchen. Victoria's hands shook around a cup of tea she didn't drink. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had happened. "He told me you were separated," Victoria finally said. "That you had an arrangement. You stayed for the money. He stayed for appearances." She laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because he made me feel special, chosen, different from all the others." "Others?" Victoria nodded. "I wasn't the first. There was a woman before me, an intern. Derek paid her off when she got too clingy. And before her, I don't know how many. I told myself I was different, that what we had was real." "What changed?" Victoria was silent for a long moment. "3 weeks ago, I found out I was pregnant." The words hit Caroline like a physical blow. Pregnant. Victoria was pregnant. "I was happy at first," Victoria continued. "I thought maybe this was our chance. Maybe now he would finally leave you. Maybe we could be a real family." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I told him." "Do you know what he said?" "No, he told me to get rid of it. Said he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice." Her voice broke. "He called your daughter a mistake, Caroline. He said Grace should never have been born." Caroline watched Victoria cry. This woman she was supposed to hate. This woman who had helped destroy her marriage. But looking at her now, Caroline saw something painfully familiar. A woman who had believed a charming man's lies. A woman who had given up pieces of herself for someone who never deserved them. A woman who was just now realizing she had never been special at all. She had just been the next victim. "What do you want?" Caroline asked. "To help you destroy him?" Victoria's voice hardened. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes." She pulled out her phone. "I have everything. Emails where he talks about you like you're nothing. Texts planning how to hide assets. Recordings of conversations about the offshore accounts. Why should I trust you? Because I have nothing left to lose." Victoria pulled down the collar of her blouse. Bruises ringed her throat, purple and yellow and ugly against her pale skin. "Because when I told him I was leaving, this is what he did. He said I wasn't going anywhere until he decided I could." Carolyn stared at the bruises, at the evidence of violence that Derek had hidden behind his charming smile and expensive suits. She had thought the worst of Derek was his neglect, his emotional absence, his affair. She had been wrong. "Welcome to the team," she said quietly. Victoria's evidence was damning. Years of emails showing Derek's true feelings about his wife. "She's gotten fat. She's boring. She never shuts up about the baby. I can't wait until I can finally be rid of her." Text to Victoria planning how to hide assets. "Put the Dubai property in the shell company." Caroline doesn't know about that one. She doesn't know about any of them, actually. She's never asked. Recordings of phone conversations that made Caroline's skin crawl. Derek discussing insider trading with board members who were supposed to be overseeing him. Derek bragging about bribing an FDA official to fast-track a drug approval. Derek laughing about how easy it had been to fool everyone. But the most devastating piece of evidence was a single video. Victoria had recorded it secretly 3 days before Grace was born. Derek in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth. "Carolyn is driving me insane with this pregnancy," he said, constantly complaining, constantly needing things. "I don't even know if the kid is mine. She's let herself go completely. God, I can't wait until this is over and I can just file the papers." The video continued. Derek talking about his plans, how he would divorce Caroline right after the birth, when she was too exhausted and emotional to fight back. How he had already moved most of his assets where she couldn't find them. How his lawyers had assured him she would get nothing. Megan played the video 3 times. Her expression hardened with each viewing. "This establishes premeditation," she said. "He wasn't just neglecting you. He was actively planning to destroy you. The baby is his," Caroline said quietly. "We can prove it with a paternity test." "I know, but that's not the point. The point is what this reveals about his character, his planning, his intent." Megan set down the tablet. "This man didn't just abandon you in an ice storm. He was going to take everything from you and leave you with nothing." Detective Frank Morrison had been investigating white-collar crime for 20 years. He had seen every scam, every scheme, every rich man who thought the rules didn't apply to him. Derek Mitchell was textbook. "The SEC is opening a formal investigation," he told Caroline and Megan in the law firm's conference room. "Based on what we've found, your husband has been manipulating stock prices through insider information. He's hidden assets from shareholders. He may have bribed federal officials. We're still untangling the offshore accounts, but the preliminary findings are significant." "How significant?" Morrison smiled grimly. 15 to 20 years significant, if everything sticks. Carolyn absorbed this, the man who had told her to take some Tylenol while she labored with their daughter. The man who had kissed his mistress goodbye and gone back to a business call. The man who had called Grace a mistake. 15 to 20 years in federal prison. "He thought he was untouchable," she said. "He thought money and power made him invincible." "They usually do," Morrison replied, "until they don't." Caroline met Derek one last time. His lawyer had insisted. Some nonsense about attempting reconciliation, preserving the family unit, reaching an amicable settlement. Her lawyer had advised against it. She went anyway. The restaurant was empty. They had reserved the entire back room at Derek's insistence. Privacy, control, the ability to manage the situation without witnesses. He looked older than she remembered. Tired. For the first time in their marriage, she could see cracks in the perfect facade. "We can work this out," he said. His voice had that familiar charm, but it sounded hollow now. Practiced. "Caroline, we have a family, a daughter. Whatever you think I've done, I know what you've done. All of it. I made mistakes. I admit that. But I love you. I love Grace. You don't know what love is." Caroline's voice was steady, calm, the voice of a woman who had nothing left to fear. "Love isn't leaving your wife to give birth in a parking lot. Love isn't having an affair for 2 years. Love isn't calling your daughter a mistake." Derek's face went white. "Victoria, that lying little..." "Victoria has nothing to lie about anymore. She's a witness now, for the SEC, for the district attorney." For the divorce proceedings, Carolyn stood. She was taller than him somehow, stronger. "Your lawyers will receive the papers tomorrow. Full custody, full access to the hidden assets. and a seat on the board when the shareholders vote you out. You can't do this. His mask was slipping. The charming executive replaced by something uglier, something desperate. I'll destroy you. I'll take everything. I'll make sure you never see grace again. Carolyn smiled, the first real smile she had felt in years. You already tried, Derek. You already did everything you could to break me. You left me alone in the worst moment of my life. You made me believe I was worthless. You planned to take my daughter and throw me away like garbage. She leaned down, her face close to his. And here I am, still standing, still fighting, still winning. She walked out of this restaurant, head high, shoulders back, footsteps steady on the marble floor. Behind her, she heard something she had never heard before. Derek Mitchell crying. The Mitchell Pharmaceuticals boardroom occupied the entire 47th floor of the downtown tower. Mahogany paneling covered every wall, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Oil paintings of company founders hung in gilded frames, stern men in dark suits who had built an empire from nothing. A crystal chandelier dominated the center of the room, casting prismatic light across the 20-foot conference table. Derek sat at the head of that table for the last time. He was wearing his best suit, the custom brioni he reserved for shareholder meetings and television appearances, navy blue with subtle pinstripes, a silk tie in Mitchell Pharmaceuticals' signature burgundy, cufflinks that had belonged to his father. His hair was perfect. His smile was firmly in place. Even now, even facing the end of everything he had built, he couldn't stop performing. Carolyn watched from a seat near the back of the room, Grace sleeping peacefully in a carrier beside her. She hadn't planned to attend. Megan had advised against it, worried about the emotional toll. But something had pulled her here. Some need to witness the moment when Derek Mitchell finally faced consequences. Robert Caldwell stood at the opposite end of the table, a stack of documents arranged precisely in front of him. His silver hair gleamed under the chandelier's light. His expression was carefully neutral, but Caroline could see satisfaction lurking behind his eyes. The other board members sat in uncomfortable silence around the table. 12 men and women who had rubber-stamped Derek's decisions for 5 years, who had looked the other way when rumors surfaced, who had accepted bonuses funded by the very schemes they were now here to condemn. This meeting is called to order, Robert said. His voice echoed slightly in the cavernous room. There is one item on the agenda. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Derek's smile flickered just for a moment. The board has received documented evidence of financial impropriety, moral misconduct, and criminal negligence by our chief executive officer. Robert's voice was steady, measured, each word landing like a hammer blow. Based on this evidence and the morality clause in the company bylaws established by our founder, Richard Mitchell, I move that Derek Mitchell be removed from his position as CEO and chairman, effective immediately. You can't do this. Derek's voice was still confident, still controlled. The voice of a man who had always gotten his way, who had never faced a problem he couldn't buy, charm, or bully his way out of. I built this company, he continued. I tripled the stock price. I expanded into 17 new markets. I'm the reason Mitchell Pharmaceuticals is worth $300 million instead of the $50 million my father left behind. Your father built this company, Robert replied calmly. You inherited it, and you nearly destroyed it with your recklessness and greed. Where's your proof? Derek leaned forward, his knuckles white against the polished table. Allegations aren't evidence. I have lawyers who will tear apart whatever flimsy case you think you have. Robert smiled. It was not a friendly smile. As a matter of fact, we do have proof. He opened the folder in front of him. Shall I read the highlights? $17 million in undisclosed transfers to shell companies in the Cayman Islands. $4 million in real estate purchases made through intermediaries to hide your ownership. A yacht registered in Panama that doesn't appear on any company or personal financial statements. Those are legitimate business investments. Then perhaps you can explain the recordings. The room went silent. Derek's face, which had remained composed throughout Robert's recitation, suddenly went pale. Recordings? Robert nodded to a technician standing by the door. The lights dimmed slightly. A large screen descended from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The first recording began to play. Derek's voice, captured through a phone held by Victoria Ashford, filled the boardroom. Caroline doesn't know anything. She's never asked about the finances, never questioned a single thing. He laughed, a cruel sound that made Caroline's stomach turn. She's too busy decorating nurseries and planning dinner parties. The perfect little trophy wife. On screen, Derek was pacing his home office. Victoria was visible at the edge of the frame, her phone angled to capture everything. The offshore accounts are completely secure. Even if we divorce, she won't get a penny of that money. My lawyers have made sure of it. The recording ended. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. That proves nothing, Derek said. His voice had lost some of its confidence. A private conversation taken out of context. Then let's provide some context, Robert replied. Play the next one. The second recording was longer, more damning. Derek on the phone with someone whose voice Caroline didn't recognize. The FDA approval will go through next month. I've already made sure of it. Yes, the phase 3 trials showed some concerning side effects, but we can bury those results. A few $100,000 in the right pockets, and no one will ever see the original data. Caroline's blood ran cold. This wasn't just financial misconduct. This was pharmaceutical fraud. Hiding safety data. Bribing federal officials. Putting lives at risk. She thought about all the people who took Mitchell Pharmaceuticals medications. All the patients who trusted that the drugs were safe. All the families who could have been harmed by Derek's greed. The recording continued. The stock price will double when the approval comes through. I've already positioned our offshore holdings to maximize the gains. By the time anyone figures out what happened, we'll have made hundreds of millions. The recording ended. Derek's mask had finally cracked. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time in Caroline's memory, he looked afraid. Those recordings were obtained illegally, he said. They're inadmissible. In a criminal court, perhaps, Robert replied. But this isn't a criminal proceeding. This is a board meeting, and the bylaws are very clear. Any conduct that brings disrepute to the company or violates the ethical standards established by our founder is grounds for immediate termination. He looked around the table at the other board members. I call for a vote, all in favor of removing Derek Mitchell from his position as CEO and chairman. Hands rose around the table, one by one, slowly at first, then faster. 12 hands, unanimous. The motion carries. Derek stood so quickly his chair fell backward, crashing against the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Security guards who had been standing unobtrusively by the doors moved forward. This isn't over, Derek snarled. His polished facade had completely shattered. Underneath was something ugly, desperate, dangerous. I have lawyers, I have connections. I'll sue every single one of you. I'll destroy this company before I let you take it from me. Actually, Robert said calmly, I believe Detective Morrison has something to say about that. The boardroom doors opened. Frank Morrison walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers and 2 men in FBI windbreakers. Derek Mitchell, Morrison said, you're under arrest. The color drained completely from Derek's face. On what charges? Morrison pulled out a folded document. Securities fraud, wire fraud, bribery of federal officials, tax evasion, money laundering, domestic violence. He smiled grimly. And we're still adding to the list. This is insane. I want my lawyer. You'll have plenty of time to call your lawyer. Morrison nodded to the uniformed officers. From jail. They moved forward. Derek tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. The officers took his arms, turned him around, and handcuffed him with practiced efficiency. You can't do this to me. Derek was shouting now, all pretense of control gone. Do you know who I am? I'm Derek Mitchell. I'm the CEO of a $300 million company. Not anymore, Robert said quietly. The officers led Derek toward the door. He struggled against their grip, his offensive shoes scuffing the polished floor. His silk tie had come loose. His perfect hair was disheveled. As they passed Caroline's seat, Derek saw her for the first time. His eyes widened, then narrowed. You, he spat. You did this. You couldn't just take the settlement and disappear like a good little wife. You had to destroy everything. Caroline stood slowly. Grace stirred in her carrier but didn't wake. I didn't destroy anything, Derek. She kept her voice calm, steady. Everything that's happening to you right now, you did to yourself. I made you. His voice was venomous. I took you from nothing and gave you everything. And this is how you repay me? Carolyn smiled, the first real smile she had felt in this room. You didn't make me. You tried to unmake me. You tried to erase everything I was and turn me into an accessory, a decoration, a prop for your perfect life. She stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead, the fear in his eyes. But here's the thing, Derek. I was always more than what you saw. I was always stronger than you believed. And the night you left me to die in a parking lot, you set me free. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but the officers pulled him forward. He stumbled, nearly falling, catching himself at the last moment. "This isn't over," he called back over his shoulder. "I'll fight this. I'll appeal. The boardroom doors closed behind him, cutting off his words. The room was silent. Then slowly, Robert Caldwell began to applaud. The other board members joined in. The sound built, echoing off the mahogany walls, filling the space where Derek's threats had hung moments before. Caroline didn't acknowledge the applause. She gathered Grace's carrier and walked toward the door. She had seen what she came to see. There was nothing left for her here. But as she reached the threshold, Robert's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Mitchell," she turned. "Your seat on the board." Robert gestured to an empty chair at the far end of the table. "It's waiting whenever you're ready." Caroline looked at the chair, at the table where Derek had sat for 5 years, making decisions, wielding power, destroying lives. "Thank you," she said, "but I think I'll find my own way." She walked out of this boardroom without looking back. Outside the Mitchell Pharmaceuticals building, chaos reigned. News vans lined the street, reporters jostled for position behind police barricades. Cameras flashed like lightning as the main doors opened, and Derek was led out in handcuffs. He kept his head down, but there was no hiding. His face would be on every news channel by noon. The footage of his perp walk would go viral by evening. "Mr. Mitchell, do you have any comment? Is it true you bribed FDA officials? What do you say to the allegations of domestic violence?" Derek said nothing. His lawyer, a silver-haired man in a suit nearly as expensive as Derek's, tried to shield him from the cameras. It was useless. There were too many, coming from every direction. The officers guided Derek into the back of a waiting police car. The door slammed shut. Through the tinted window, Caroline could see his face. Pale, shocked. The face of a man who had finally discovered that money couldn't buy everything. The police car pulled away from the curb, slowly at first, then faster. Within moments, it had disappeared into traffic, taking Derek Mitchell toward the federal detention center where he would await trial. Caroline stood on the sidewalk, Grace in her arms, watching until the car was out of sight. It was over. No, that wasn't quite right. It was just beginning. Megan found her 20 minutes later, sitting on a bench in the small park across from the Mitchell Pharmaceuticals building. "I saw the news," Megan said, dropping onto the bench beside her. "They're saying it's one of the biggest corporate fraud cases in state history." Caroline didn't respond. She was watching Grace, who had woken and was now studying a nearby pigeon with intense concentration. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know." Caroline shook her head slowly. "I thought I would feel something. Triumph, vindication, relief. But I just feel empty. That's normal." Megan put a hand on her shoulder. "You've been running on adrenaline for months, fighting for your life, for your daughter. Now the fight is over, and your body doesn't know what to do with itself. Is it over?" Megan pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. "The SEC charges alone carry up to 10 years, she said. Add the bribery charges, the tax evasion, the domestic violence case Victoria filed. His lawyers are already discussing plea deals. What are they offering? 8 to 12 years, federal minimum security facility, but he has to plead guilty to everything. Full public admission, complete accounting of all hidden assets. He'll never agree to that. His ego won't allow it. Then he goes to trial." Megan shrugged, "And probably gets 20 to 25. His lawyers know the evidence we have. They know they can't win. He'll take the deal." Grace made a happy sound, reaching toward the pigeon, which had hopped closer to investigate the humans on its bench. "What about the divorce settlement?" Caroline asked. "Finalized this morning," Megan's voice held a note of satisfaction. "Full custody of Grace, 60% of the disclosed assets, 40% of the hidden assets, since we found them ourselves. The house in Connecticut, the vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons, your seat on the Mitchell Pharmaceuticals board, which comes with a substantial equity stake. I told Robert I didn't want the board seat. You don't have to take it, but it's there if you change your mind. Megan paused. There's one more thing. What? The judge awarded you something extra. Damages for emotional distress and reckless endangerment. She named a figure that made Caroline's head spin. Plus, you get to keep everything Derek gave you during the marriage. The jewelry, the cars, all of it. I don't want his things. Then sell them. Donate them. Burn them in a bonfire. The point is you have choices now. You have freedom. You have a future. Carolyn looked down at her daughter. Grace had given up on the pigeon and was now chewing contentedly on her own fist. A future. For so long that word had meant nothing to her. Her future had been Derek's future. His goals, his dreams, his ambitions. She had been a passenger in her own life, going wherever he directed. Not anymore. What do I do now? She asked quietly. Megan smiled. Whatever you want. That night, Caroline drove to the Whole Foods parking lot. She didn't know why. Some instinct, some need to return to the place where everything had changed, to stand in the spot where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. The parking lot was nearly empty. The store had closed an hour ago. Only a few cars remained, probably employees finishing their shifts. She parked in the same spot, the one where her Lexus had spun out on black ice, the one where Nathan had found her, the one where Grace had taken her first breath. The night was clear and warm. Nothing like the ice storm that had raged 3 months ago. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. Carolyn sat in her car for a long time, just breathing, just existing, just being present in this moment that she had never expected to reach. 3 months ago, she had been here, terrified, abandoned, certain she was going to die. Now she was free. Now she was wealthy beyond anything she had imagined. Now the man who had hurt her was sitting in a jail cell, facing the consequences of his choices. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was this. She had survived. Not because of the money, not because of the lawyers, not because of the evidence Victoria had provided, or the board members who had turned on Derek. She had survived because somewhere inside her, in this parking lot, in that moment of absolute crisis, she had found a strength she didn't know she had. I'm not going to die here. She had said those words out loud, alone in her car, in the middle of an ice storm, and she had meant them. My baby is not going to die here. And Grace hadn't. Grace had been born healthy and strong and perfect, delivered by a stranger's steady hands while Caroline's husband celebrated a business deal and kissed his mistress goodbye. Grace. The name meant something different now. It wasn't just a pretty word she had picked from a baby book. It was a reminder, a promise, a declaration of faith in something larger than herself. A tap on her window made her jump. Nathan stood outside holding 2 cups of coffee from the 24-hour gas station down the street. His smile was warm, familiar. The same smile that had gotten her through the worst night of her life. I thought I might find you here, he said as she rolled down the window. How did you know? Because it's where I would be. He handed her a cup. On a night like this, after a day like today. You heard about Derek. Everyone heard about Derek. Nathan's voice was quiet. It's all over the news. Corporate fraud, bribery, domestic violence. They're calling it the downfall of a titan. Carolyn laughed softly. He would hate that. Being called a titan who fell. He always thought he was invincible. Nobody's invincible. No. Carolyn looked down at her coffee. Steam rose from the cup, curling into the night air. Nobody is. They were quiet for a moment. The parking lot was peaceful, empty, just another patch of asphalt in an ordinary shopping plaza. Do you remember what you said to me? Carolyn asked. That night, when you found me. I said a lot of things that night. You said I was one of the strongest people you'd ever met. She shook her head. I wasn't strong. I was terrified. I was crying, or so she should be crying. I was convinced I was going to die. Nathan walked around the car and opened the passenger door. He sat down beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Being strong doesn't mean not being afraid, he said. Being strong means being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You were in labor. Your car had broken down. You were alone in a storm. And you didn't give up. You kept fighting. You brought your daughter into the world. With your help, You would have done it without me. Nathan's voice was certain. I just made it a little easier. Carolyn turned to look at him, really look at him, at the gray at his temples, at the lines around his eyes, at the kindness in his expression. Why did you stop? She asked. That night, why did you pull into this parking lot? I don't know. Nathan was quiet for a moment. I was on my way home from my shift, tired, ready for bed. But something made me turn in here. A feeling, an instinct. He paused, his eyes distant. After my wife died, I stopped believing in things like that. Signs, fate, purpose. I just went through the motions, showed up for my shifts, did my job, went home to an empty apartment. But then I found you, and everything changed? Nathan smiled. Everything changed. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. A car pulled into the far end of the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness before going dark. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, Caroline said finally. For so long, my life was about Derek, his goals, his schedule, his needs. I don't even know who I am without him. You're Grace's mother, Nathan said. You're a survivor. You're a woman who looked death in the face and told it to go to hell. That's not an identity. That's a series of events. Then make it an identity. Nathan turned to face her. You have something most people never get. A second chance, a clean slate. You can be anyone you want to be. No. Do anything you want to do. What if I don't know what I want? Then figure it out. Nathan's voice was gentle but firm. Try things, fail at things, succeed at things, make mistakes, learn from them. That's what life is. That's what living is. And what about you? What about me? Will you be part of it? Carolyn felt her heart beating faster. Part of my figuring out? Nathan reached across the center console and took her hand. His fingers were warm, rough from years of work, gentle in a way Derek's had never been. If you want me to be, he said, I'm not going anywhere. They sat together in the parking lot until the eastern sky began to lighten. Talking, not talking, just being together. When the first rays of sunlight touched the Whole Foods sign, Caroline started her car. Where are we going? Nathan asked. Home, Caroline said, and then breakfast, and then whatever comes next. She pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind the place where she had nearly died, the place where she had been reborn. In the back seat, Grace's car seat was ready and waiting. Soon she would pick up her daughter from her mother's house. Soon they would start the rest of their lives. But for now, in this moment, Carolyn was content. She had survived. She had won. And the best was yet to come. 6 months later, the moving truck pulled away from Carolyn's new house on a crisp October morning. She stood on the front porch, Grace on her hip, watching it disappear around the corner. The last boxes had been unpacked. The last pictures had been hung. The last traces of her old life had been sorted, donated, or thrown away. This was home now. The house was nothing like the mansion. 3 bedrooms instead of 12. A small backyard with a wooden fence instead of acres of manicured gardens. A kitchen where you could actually reach everything without walking a mile, where the appliances were practical instead of professional grade, where the countertops showed the wear of a life actually lived. It was perfect. Caroline had chosen every detail herself. The pale blue paint in the living room, the hardwood floors that creaked slightly when you walked on them, the window seat in Grace's nursery where she could sit and read stories as her daughter grew. For the first time in her adult life, she lived in a space that reflected who she actually was, not who someone else wanted her to be. Grace squirmed in her arms, reaching toward a bird that had landed on the porch railing. 9 months old and already determined to explore everything, already refusing to sit still, already showing a stubborn streak that made Caroline smile every time she saw it. You're going to be trouble, Caroline told her daughter. Good trouble. The kind of trouble that changes the world. The bird flew away. Grace watched it go with wistful, fascinated eyes. The doorbell rang. Carolyn opened it to find Nathan standing on her porch, holding a potted plant and wearing a sheepish smile. Housewarming gift, he said. The woman at the nursery said it's impossible to kill. I figured that was important information. Caroline laughed. She had been doing that more lately. Laughing. It still surprised her sometimes, the sound of her own joy. Come in, she said. I just made coffee. Nathan had become a fixture in her life over the past 6 months. Not rushing, not pushing, just present. He showed up when she needed help assembling furniture. He texted her funny memes at 2 in the morning when he knew she was up with the baby. He remembered how she took her coffee and which podcast she liked, and that she hated cilantro with an irrational passion. He never asked for anything, never expected anything. He was just there, steady and patient, like a lighthouse in a storm she had already survived. "Place looks great," he said, settling onto her couch while she poured coffee in the kitchen. "You've done a lot with it. It's starting to feel like home." "She gets that from you," Nathan said, watching Grace crawl across the living room floor with fierce determination. "The stubbornness, I mean." "Probably." Carolyn handed him a mug and sat down beside him, close enough to feel his warmth but not quite touching, along with the inability to sit still and the tendency to put everything in her mouth. "So normal baby stuff." "Exactly." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Grace explore her new domain. She had found a basket of toys in the corner and was systematically removing each one, examining it with intense concentration, then tossing it aside in search of something more interesting. Carolyn's phone buzzed, a text from Megan. "Board meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't be late," she smiled. 6 months ago, she hadn't known the first thing about running a pharmaceutical company. Now she sat on the board of directors of Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest healthcare companies in the country. She had spent countless hours learning about drug development pipelines and regulatory frameworks and shareholder relations. She had hired consultants, attended seminars, read every book she could find. She was still learning, but she was no longer afraid. The board meeting the next morning was held in the same mahogany and leather conference room where Derek had been voted out. Carolyn took her seat at the table, surrounded by men in expensive suits who had initially looked at her with barely concealed skepticism. That skepticism had faded over the past 6 months. She had proven herself, not through aggression or manipulation, but through hard work and genuine curiosity. She asked questions when she didn't understand something. She admitted when she was wrong. She treated everyone, from the janitor to the chief financial officer, with the same respect. It was a revolutionary approach. Apparently. "The quarterly numbers are in," Robert Caldwell announced. "Stock price is up 14% since last quarter. Revenue is exceeding projections by 8%. The new cancer drug is showing promising results in phase 3 trials." Applause around the table. Carolyn smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. "I'd like to propose something," she said when the celebration died down. The room went quiet. Everyone looked at her. "The Mitchell Foundation for Women's Health has been operational for 3 months now," Carolyn continued. "We've funded emergency transportation for over 200 pregnant women in crisis situations. We've trained first responders in 12 states on emergency obstetric care. We've advocated for policy changes that have improved healthcare access in rural communities." She paused, looking around the table. "But it's not enough. Women are still dying in childbirth in this country at rates that should be unacceptable. Maternal mortality has been rising for decades. We have the resources to do something about it." "What are you proposing?" Robert asked. "A dedicated maternal health division within Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, research into pregnancy complications, development of new drugs and treatments, partnerships with hospitals and clinics across the country." She slid a folder across the table. "I've prepared a preliminary proposal. The initial investment would be significant, but the potential returns, both financial and humanitarian, are substantial." The board members exchanged glances. Carolyn held her breath. "I think," Robert said slowly, "that this is exactly the kind of initiative that Richard Mitchell would have supported. He always believed that profit and purpose could coexist." The vote was unanimous. Caroline left the meeting with her head held high. She had just secured funding for a project that could save thousands of lives. A project that had grown from the worst night of her life. Grace was going to grow up knowing that her mother had turned tragedy into triumph. That pain could be transformed into purpose. That one person, with enough determination, could actually change the world. The doorbell rang that evening. Patricia Mitchell stood on the doorstep. Caroline's mother-in-law looked different than she had 6 months ago. Smaller somehow. Older. The perfect facade had cracked, revealing the frightened woman underneath. Her designer clothes were the same, but they hung on her frame differently, as if she had lost weight. Her makeup was flawless, but it couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes. "I know I have no right to be here," Patricia said. Her voice trembled slightly. "I know what I said, how I treated you. I blamed you for everything when I should have been blaming my own son." Caroline leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Then why are you here?" "Because Derek is going to prison for 8 to 12 years. Because the company his father built nearly collapsed because of his crimes. Because I spent 40 years protecting an image instead of seeing the truth." Patricia's voice broke. A tear slid down her cheek, cutting a path through her carefully applied foundation. "Because I want to know my granddaughter, and I know I don't deserve to." Carolyn studied the woman in front of her. This was the same Patricia who had blamed her for giving birth in a parking lot, who had called her selfish and dramatic and ungrateful, who had defended Derek even when the evidence of his cruelty was undeniable. But it was also a woman who had spent her entire life trapped in a gilded cage, who had married into money and power and discovered too late that they came with chains, who had probably been told, just as Caroline had been told, that her needs didn't matter, that her job was to smile and support and never ever make waves. "Why should I let you into Grace's life?" Caroline asked. "Give me one good reason." Patricia was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I made the same mistake you almost made. I gave up everything for a man who didn't deserve it. I lost myself in his world and forgot who I used to be." She met Caroline's eyes. "I was 22 when I married Richard. I had dreams, Caroline. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to help children. But Richard needed a wife who could host dinner parties and share charity galas and look beautiful on his arm. So that's what I became. What happened to your dreams?" "I buried them. I told myself that his success was my success, that his happiness was my happiness, that if I just kept playing the role perfectly, everything would be fine." Patricia wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. "And then I had Derek, and I saw what he was becoming. Selfish, entitled, cruel, but I couldn't admit it, because admitting it would mean admitting that I had wasted my entire life. So you enabled him." "Yes, I enabled him. I made excuses for him. I blamed everyone except him for his failures." Patricia's shoulders slumped. "I am not asking for forgiveness, Carolyn. I don't deserve it. But I am asking for a chance to be different, a chance to know my granddaughter before it's too late." Carolyn thought about all the times Patricia had hurt her, the cruel comments, the dismissive looks, the constant implication that Caroline wasn't good enough for the Mitchell family. But she also thought about second chances, about redemption, about the possibility that people could change if they truly wanted to. Grace gurgled from inside the house, babbling at something only she could see. "Grace needs family," Caroline said finally. "Real family, not the kind that tears you down, but the kind that builds you up. If you want to be that kind of family, you can try." Patricia's face crumpled. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. I don't deserve—" "You're right. You don't. But Grace does." Caroline stepped aside. "Come in. But I'm watching everything. And the first sign that you're the woman you used to be, you're gone. Permanently. I understand." "And Patricia," Caroline added as her mother-in-law stepped over the threshold, "if you ever blame me for anything Derek did again, this door will close forever." Are we clear? Crystal clear. The Mitchell Foundation for Women's Health launched on a sunny Tuesday afternoon in late October. The press conference was held in the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel. Cameras lined the back of the room, reporters filled the chairs. Social media was already buzzing with anticipation. Carolyn stood at the podium, Grace in her arms, facing a sea of flashing lights. She was wearing a simple blue dress, no designer labels, no excessive jewelry. Just a woman with a baby and a microphone and a story to tell. "1 year ago," she began, "I gave birth to my daughter in a parking lot." The room went silent. "I was 8 months pregnant. There was an ice storm. Emergency services were overwhelmed. And my husband," she paused, letting the word hang in the air, "refused to drive me to the hospital." She could feel the tension in the room, the hunger for details, the sympathy and the outrage, and the morbid curiosity that came with any sensational story. "I could have died that night. Grace could have died. We survived because a stranger, an off-duty paramedic named Nathan Reeves, happened to drive through that parking lot at the exact moment I needed help. She found Nathan's face in the crowd. He was standing near the back, trying to be inconspicuous, failing completely. When their eyes met, he smiled. But not every woman is that lucky. Every year, hundreds of women in this country die from pregnancy-related complications. Thousands more come close. Many of them, like me, simply couldn't get the help they needed in time. Caroline shifted Grace to her other hip. The baby was getting heavy, but she refused to hand her off to anyone else. This moment was for both of them. That's why I'm launching the Mitchell Foundation for Women's Health. Our mission is simple. No woman should ever have to give birth alone, because there was no one to help her. No woman should ever die because she couldn't reach a hospital in time. No woman should ever be told that her pain doesn't matter. Applause erupted through the ballroom. Caroline waited for it to die down. The foundation will fund emergency transportation for pregnant women in crisis situations. We will train first responders across the country in emergency obstetric care. We will advocate for policy changes that improve healthcare access in underserved communities. And we will work with Mitchell Pharmaceuticals to develop new treatments and technologies that can save mothers' lives. She looked directly into the cameras. This is personal for me, but it's also universal. Every woman deserves to be heard. Every woman deserves support in her most vulnerable moments. And every woman deserves better than being told to take some Tylenol and wait. The questions came fast and fierce. Mrs. Mitchell, how do you respond to critics who say this foundation is just a publicity stunt? I respond by pointing to our results. In 3 months of operation, we have helped over 200 women receive emergency care. That's not a publicity stunt. That's lives saved. What about your ex-husband? Have you spoken to Derek Mitchell since his incarceration? No, and I don't intend to. Is it true that you're now serving on the board of directors of Mitchell Pharmaceuticals? Yes. I believe I have a responsibility to ensure that the company operates with integrity and compassion. Those values were important to my father-in-law, Richard Mitchell, and they're important to me. One last question. Do you have any advice for women who are in similar situations? Women who are being mistreated or neglected by their partners? Caroline paused. This was the question she had been waiting for. My advice is this: trust yourself. Your pain is real. Your needs are valid. You deserve better. She swallowed hard. It took me 8 years to understand that. 8 years of being told that I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive, that I should be grateful for what I had. I believed those lies because the person telling them was supposed to love me. She looked down at Grace, who was playing with her necklace, oblivious to the cameras in the crowd. Don't waste 8 years. Don't wait until you're giving birth in a parking lot to realize that you matter. You matter now. Today, this moment. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise doesn't deserve to be in your life. The applause was deafening. After the press conference, a woman approached Caroline in the hallway. She was young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and a baby on her hip that looked about 6 months old. Her clothes were clean but worn. Her shoes had holes in them. She looked like someone who had been surviving rather than living. Mrs. Mitchell, the woman's voice was hesitant. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're busy, but I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what? For telling your story. The woman blinked back tears. 2 years ago, my boyfriend left me at a gas station when my contractions started. He said he had somewhere more important to be, a poker game with his friends. Caroline's heart clenched. I delivered in the bathroom, the woman continued, alone on the floor. A truck driver found me an hour later and called 911. She looked down at her baby. I thought I was the only one. I thought it was my fault somehow, that I had done something wrong to deserve it. You didn't do anything wrong. I know that now. Because of you. Because I saw your story on the news and realized that it wasn't just me. That there are other women who have been through the same thing. The woman reached out and touched Caroline's arm. You gave me hope, Mrs. Mitchell. Hope that things can get better. Hope that I'm not alone. Caroline set Grace down in her stroller and pulled the woman into a hug. They stood there for a long moment, two strangers connected by shared trauma, holding each other in a hotel hallway while the world rushed by around them. You're not alone, Caroline whispered. None of us are. We just have to stop protecting the people who hurt us and start protecting each other. The woman pulled back, wiping her eyes. Thank you. What's your name? Rebecca. Rebecca Martinez. Rebecca. Caroline reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This is my personal number. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. Do you understand? Rebecca looked at the card like it was made of gold. I understand. Promise me. I promise. That night, Caroline sat on her back porch, Grace asleep in the nursery, a glass of wine in her hand. The stars were bright above her, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Her phone was full of messages. Congratulations from friends and colleagues, interview requests from journalists, partnership proposals from organizations around the world. But the messages that mattered most were the ones from ordinary women. Thousands of them, pouring in from every corner of the country. My mother-in-law told me to stop being dramatic when I said I thought something was wrong. I lost the baby that night, but reading your story made me realize it wasn't my fault. My husband said labor pains were just gas. He went to play video games while I delivered in our bedroom. I've been ashamed of that story for 15 years. But now I'm telling it. My boyfriend told me I was overreacting. The nurses believed him instead of me. They sent me home. I almost died. Thank you for making me feel seen. The collective pain was staggering. All these women carrying these stories in silence for years, decades, lifetimes, believing they were alone, believing their suffering didn't matter. Caroline read until 3 in the morning, until Grace woke for her feeding, until the weight of all those stories transformed from grief into something else entirely. Purpose. This was why she had survived. Not just to escape Derek, not just to build a new life, but to be a voice for everyone who had been silenced, to be proof that you could endure the unimaginable and come out stronger on the other side. She was going to make sure no woman ever felt alone again. Nathan called the next morning. I saw the press conference, he said. You were incredible. I was terrified, didn't show. He paused. I was proud of you, Caroline, really proud. She smiled, holding the phone between her ear and shoulder as she fed Grace her morning bottle. Thank you. For everything. I didn't do anything. You showed up. On the worst night of my life, when everyone else abandoned me, you showed up. That's not nothing, Nathan. That's everything. A long silence on the other end of the line. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. I'd show up again. Every time. For as long as you'll let me. Carolyn's heart swelled. She thought about all the ways Derek had failed her, all the promises he had broken, all the times he had chosen everything and everyone over her. Nathan was different. Nathan had proven himself not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of kindness, through showing up, through staying. Come over for dinner tonight, she said. I'll cook. You cook? I'm learning. It might be terrible. I'll bring wine just in case. She laughed. That's probably wise. Nathan arrived at 6 with 2 bottles of wine, a bouquet of sunflowers, and a stuffed elephant for Grace. The elephant is bigger than she is, Caroline observed as Nathan presented it to the delighted baby. She'll grow into it. They cooked together in her small kitchen. Nothing fancy. Pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread from scratch, a salad that Nathan assembled while Caroline stirred the sauce and pretended to know what she was doing. Grace sat in her high chair, making a spectacular mess of the Cheerios Nathan had given her to keep her occupied. She had more of them in her hair than in her mouth, but she seemed happy about the situation. This is nice, Caroline said as they sat down to eat. Which part? All of it, she gestured around the kitchen. The cooking, the company, the chaos. She pointed at Grace, who was now attempting to feed Cheerios to the stuffed elephant. The absurdity. Nathan laughed. I have to admit, I never pictured my life going this way. What do you mean? When my wife died, I thought that was it. I thought I'd had my chance at happiness and blown it somehow. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life alone, going through the motions, waiting for it to be over. He met her eyes. And then I drove through a parking lot in an ice storm and found a woman in labor and found you. He reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were warm, gentle, everything Derek's had never been. Caroline, I need you to know something. What? I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm not trying to rush anything. But I care about you and Grace. He swallowed hard. I care about both of you more than I've cared about anything in a very long time. And if there's any chance at all, that you might feel the same way, I need to know. Caroline looked at this man who had delivered her daughter in a frozen parking lot, who had held her hand when she was terrified, who had shown up again and again, asking nothing in return. She thought about all the reasons she should be careful, all the ways she had been hurt before, all the walls she had built to protect herself from ever feeling that kind of pain again. And then she let them fall. I do, she said. Feel the same way, I mean. I'm terrified of it. I'm terrified of trusting someone again. But Nathan, she squeezed his hand, you're the first person in a very long time who has made me feel safe. He stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her to her feet. For a long moment, they just stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Then he kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. She answered by pulling him closer, deepening the kiss, letting herself feel something she had thought was lost forever. Hope. Grace chose that moment to throw a Cheerio at Nathan's head. They broke apart, laughing. The baby clapped her hands, delighted by the reaction she had caused. I think she approves, Nathan said. She has excellent taste. Gets it from her mother. Carolyn smiled. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was genuinely, completely happy. 1 year, 365 days since the ice storm, since the parking lot, since the night that had shattered her old life and given birth to something new. Grace's first birthday party was small, intimate, perfect. Megan and her wife Sarah arrived first, armed with more presents than any 1-year-old could possibly need. Patricia came next, nervous and trying too hard, but genuinely present in a way she had never been before. A few friends from Caroline's new life filled in the rest, women she had met through the foundation, women who understood what it meant to rebuild from nothing. And Nathan, always Nathan. He had been there since dawn, helping her decorate, calming her nerves, reminding her that a slightly lopsided homemade cake was more meaningful than any professional confection could ever be. The backyard was strung with pink and white streamers. Balloons bobbed in the October breeze. A banner that read, Happy Birthday. Grace hung from the fence, slightly crooked, despite 3 attempts to straighten it. Grace sat in her high chair at the head of the table, eyes wide with wonder at all the fuss being made on her behalf. She was wearing a pink dress with a tutu skirt that Patricia had bought her, along with a sparkly headband that she kept trying to pull off. One candle flickered on the cake. Make a wish, Megan said, holding up her phone to capture the moment. She's 1, Sarah pointed out. She doesn't know what a wish is. Then her mother should make it for her. Caroline looked at her daughter. At this perfect, impossible little person who had come into the world under the worst possible circumstances and somehow transformed everything. She closed her eyes. I wish, she thought, that you always know how loved you are, that you never doubt your worth, that you grow up strong and kind and brave, that you know it's okay to fall down as long as you get back up, that you find people who see you, really see you, and love you exactly as you are. She opened her eyes and blew out the candle. Grace squealed with delight and immediately plunged both hands into the cake. So much for the pictures, Megan laughed, snapping away as frosting covered the baby's face, hands, dress, and somehow the stuffed elephant that Nathan had given her, which was sitting nearby. Perfect pictures, Caroline corrected, the best kind. The party was exactly what she had wanted. No pretense, no performance, just people who cared about each other, celebrating a little girl who had no idea how much she had changed all their lives. Patricia spent most of the party holding Grace, murmuring to her in a soft voice Caroline had never heard before. The Ice Queen was thawing, slowly but surely, one grandmother moment at a time. She looks happy, Nathan observed, standing beside Caroline as they watched Patricia make silly faces at the baby. She's trying. Is that enough? Caroline considered the question. I don't know, but it's more than I expected. And Grace deserves to have a grandmother who loves her, even if that grandmother made terrible mistakes. You're more forgiving than I would be. I'm not forgiving her. Caroline's voice was firm. I'm giving her a chance to be different. There's a difference. What if she goes back to who she was? Then she loses access to Grace. Permanently. No second chances after the first one. She knows that. And she agreed? She didn't have a choice. Caroline turned to look at Nathan. I'm not the woman I was a year ago. I don't let people walk over me anymore. I don't make excuses for bad behavior. And I don't keep toxic people in my life just because they're family. Nathan smiled. Have I mentioned lately how much I admire you? You can mention it again. I don't mind. He laughed and pulled her close. She leaned into him, savoring the warmth and the comfort and the sense of safety that came with his presence. This, she thought, this is what love is supposed to feel like. 3 days after the party, a letter arrived. Carolyn recognized the handwriting immediately. Derek's cramped, impatient scrawl, the penmanship of a man who had always been too busy to slow down for anything, including legibility. She almost threw it away unopened. She had no interest in anything Derek Mitchell had to say. No curiosity about his excuses or his self-justifications or his attempts to rewrite history. But something made her pause. Some need for closure, for finality, for one last look at the man she had married before she closed that chapter of her life forever. She sat down at her kitchen table, poured herself a glass of wine, and opened the envelope. Carolyn, I know you'll probably throw this away. I would, but I had to try. I've had a year to think about what I did, what I became. I tell myself I wasn't always this way, that somewhere along the line, the money and the power changed me, that if things had been different, I might have been a better man. But that's a lie I tell myself to sleep at night. The truth is I chose every day, every moment, every decision. I chose the path that led to this. I chose ambition over love. I chose control over partnership. I chose my ego over your needs. I chose myself over you and Grace. I remember our wedding day. You were so beautiful, Caroline, so full of hope. And I remember thinking that I had won, that I had acquired the perfect wife to go with the perfect career and the perfect life. I didn't think about making you happy. I thought about how having you made me look. That's the truth, the ugly, shameful truth that I've been avoiding for years. I never loved you the way you deserve to be loved. I loved what you represented. A trophy, an achievement. Another box checked on my list of success metrics. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not writing to ask for another chance. I know that's impossible. I'm not even writing to apologize, because apologies are worthless without change. And I don't know if I'm capable of changing. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to acknowledge the harm I caused. Not for you, for me. To truly understand what I destroyed before I can even begin to rebuild myself into something better. I destroyed your career. I isolated you from your friends and family. I made you feel small and worthless and dependent on me. I gaslit you into believing that your needs didn't matter. I cheated on you for years and made you think it was your fault. And then, on the worst night of your life, I abandoned you completely. I told you to take some Tylenol while you were in labor. I kissed another woman goodbye while you were upstairs in pain. I chose a business call over driving you to the hospital. Our daughter was born in a parking lot because of my selfishness and cruelty. I will carry that knowledge for the rest of my life. It will haunt me in ways that prison never could. Because even now, even after everything, some part of me wanted to blame you. Wanted to say that you should have planned better, been more responsible, not bothered me when I was working. That impulse, that automatic deflection of responsibility, is the sickness at the core of who I am. It's why I'm in here. It's why I lost everything. It's why I don't deserve you or Grace or any of the good things I was given. I hope you're happy. I truly do. For all my faults, I'm not so far gone that I wish you ill. You were always too good for me, Carolyn. I was just too arrogant to see it. I hope Grace grows up strong and kind and nothing like me. I hope she never knows the man I really was. I hope she only knows that her mother loved her enough to walk away from a life of luxury to give her something better. Something real. I hope you find someone who deserves amor, someone who sees you clearly and loves you fully and shows up when you need them. Someone who would drive through 100 ice storms for the privilege of being by your side. I wasn't that man. I never would have been that man. And that's the worst part of all. Not that I failed, that I never even tried. Goodbye, Caroline. Derek. She read the letter 3 times, then she walked out to her back porch, sat in her favorite chair, watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink, streaking the clouds with colors that looked like they belonged in a painting. She didn't cry. She didn't feel vindicated or satisfied or relieved. She didn't feel angry or stilted or bitter. She didn't feel anything at all. That was how she knew she had healed. Derek's words didn't have power anymore. His confession didn't move her. His self-awareness, however belated, didn't earn her sympathy. He was just a man who had made terrible choices and was finally facing consequences. He wasn't her monster. He wasn't her lesson. He wasn't her story. He was just her past. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and walked inside to the kitchen. She opened the cabinet under the sink, dropped the envelope into the trash, and closed the cabinet without a second look. Then she went to check on Grace, who was sleeping peacefully in her crib, one hand wrapped around the ear of her stuffed elephant. You, Carolyn whispered to her daughter, are my story. You are my present and my future, and every good thing I have to look forward to. You are worth everything I went through to get here. Grace stirred slightly, smiled in her sleep, and settled back into dreams. Caroline stood there for a long time, watching her daughter breathe. The following weekend, Caroline drove to the Whole Foods parking lot. It had become something of a tradition. Every month on the anniversary of that night, she came back to this spot, not to wallow, not to relive the trauma, but to remember, to honor, to mark how far she had come. Nathan followed in his truck as he always did now. Grace babbled happily in her car seat, pointing at birds and clouds and airplanes and everything else that caught her ever-curious attention. The parking lot was busy, Saturday afternoon shoppers coming and going, loading groceries into their cars, living their ordinary lives in this ordinary place. None of them knew what had happened here a year ago. None of them could see the ghost that Caroline could see. She parked in the same spot, the one where Nathan had found her, the one where Grace had taken her first breath, the one where everything had changed. Nathan pulled in beside her, got out, walked over to her window with that calm, steady presence that had become as essential to her as breathing. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay." She opened her door and stepped out. The October air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke and approaching winter. So different from that terrible night, so much warmer despite the season. She opened the back door and lifted Grace from her car seat. The little girl immediately reached for Nathan, and he took her without hesitation. She snuggled against his shoulder, one tiny hand gripping his jacket, completely secure in the arms of a man who wasn't her father, but who loved her as fiercely as any father could. "This is where we met," Carolyn said. "I remember, a year ago, I gave birth here, right there." She pointed to the spot where her car had come to rest. "Because my husband wouldn't drive me to the hospital. Because I had no one else to call. Because I thought my life was over." She walked to the spot, stood there, let the memories wash over her. The fear, the pain, the absolute certainty that she was going to die alone in the cold. And then the headlights, the knock on the window, Nathan's calm voice telling her she wasn't alone anymore. "I thought I had lost everything that night," Carolyn said. "I thought I was at the lowest point of my life. And I was, but I didn't understand something important." "What's that?" "That sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself." She turned to look at Nathan, at Grace, at the life she had built from the rubble of the old one. "I wasn't losing anything that night, Nathan. I was gaining everything. I just didn't know it yet." He walked over to her, Grace still in his arms, and pulled her into an embrace. The three of them stood there in the parking lot, holding each other, a family formed not by blood, but by choice. "I love you," Nathan said quietly. "I've been wanting to say that for months. I love you, Carolyn. Both of you." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. Eyes that had seen her at her worst and stayed. Eyes that had never looked at her with judgment or disappointment or contempt. "I love you too," she said, and she meant it, with every broken piece of her heart that had somehow mended itself into something stronger than before. Grace chose that moment to grab both their faces with her chubby hands, one on each cheek, and pull them together until their foreheads touched. I think she's trying to tell us something, Nathan laughed. She's very bossy. Gets it from her mother. Caroline smiled. Definitely. They walked back to their cars slowly, reluctant to leave this place, this moment, this perfect snapshot of happiness. Where to now? Nathan asked. Caroline looked at the parking lot one last time, at the spot where she had been reborn, at the asphalt, in the shopping carts, in the ordinary people living ordinary lives all around her. Home, she said. Let's go home. They drove away together, three people bound not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by love, by grace. The parking lot faded in the rearview mirror, just another spot in an ordinary shopping plaza. The place where a woman's world had shattered, the place where she had been reborn, the place where she had found everything she never knew she needed. Carolyn Mitchell didn't die that night in the ice storm. She was finally born, and now, a year later, she was finally living. Sometimes the worst moments of your life become the first steps toward your best. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. Sometimes grace comes in the strangest forms: a stranger in a storm, a baby born in a parking lot, a second chance at a life you never knew you wanted. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you learn the most important truth of all. You were always strong enough. You were always worthy. You were always capable of more than anyone, including yourself, ever believed. You just had to find the courage to claim it. Caroline had found that courage. In the darkest moment of her life, in the cold, in the fear, in the abandonment, she had discovered something unbreakable inside herself. And now she was using that strength to help other women find their own. The foundation was growing every day. Thousands of women had been helped. Thousands of stories had been shared. Thousands of lives had been changed. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough, because somewhere out there right now, another woman was being told that her pain didn't matter. Another woman was being abandoned by someone who should have loved her. Another woman was wondering if she was strong enough to survive. To that woman, Caroline had a message. You are strong enough. You are worthy enough. You are brave enough. You are enough, period, exactly as you are, without changing a single thing. And you are not alone. You will never be alone again. Grace fell asleep on the drive home, her head lolling against the side of her car seat, her elephant clutched tightly in her arms. Nathan reached over and took Caroline's hand, intertwining their fingers. Happy anniversary, he said. It's not really an anniversary, more like a rebirth day. Okay, happy rebirth day? She laughed. That's terrible. Yeah, but you're smiling. She was. She was smiling and laughing and holding hands with a man who loved her and driving home to a house she had chosen and a life she had built and a future that was entirely her own. She was happy, not despite what had happened to her, because of it. Because the worst night of her life had stripped away everything that wasn't essential and left her with something priceless. Herself, and that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all. If this story touched your heart, if Caroline's journey reminded you that strength lives inside every woman, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest. And share this with someone who needs to hear that starting over is possible. Your support helps me bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for staying until the end. You're stronger than you know. See you in the next one.